The conference room of Whitmore and Associates law firm felt like a courtroom, cold and unforgiving. Chukwuebuka sat at the mahogany table, his hands folded calmly in front of him, while across from him sat Nnenna, her mother Adaeze, and her brother Obinna. Their lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Marcus, shuffled papers with a satisfied smirk. The divorce was final. After 8 years of marriage, it was over. "I hope you're satisfied," Adaeze spat, her eyes burning with contempt as she looked at Chukwuebuka. "My daughter wasted 8 years of her life on a man who amounted to nothing. A janitor, a cleaner. You should be ashamed of yourself." Chukwuebuka said nothing. He simply stared at the table, his jaw tight. Obinna leaned forward, his voice dripping with mockery. "You know what kills me? She actually believed in you. She thought you'd make something of yourself. Instead, you're 42 years old, mopping floors for minimum wage while real men are building empires." He laughed, a cruel, hollow sound that echoed in the sterile room. "You're pathetic." Nnenna didn't look at her husband. Former husband now. She kept her eyes on the papers in front of her, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the wood. "I'm done," she said quietly, her voice devoid of emotion. "I gave you everything. I paid for our apartment, our food, our life. And what did you give me? Embarrassment? Do you know what it's like to tell people my husband is a janitor?" Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Also, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Chukwuebuka finally lifted his eyes. They were dark, unreadable. "I never asked you for anything, Nnenna." "No, you didn't," she shot back, her voice rising. "You just took. You took my youth, my money, my reputation. I'm 38 years old, and I have nothing to show for this marriage except shame." She stood abruptly, grabbing her designer purse. "I'm marrying Chinedu next month. He's a doctor. He owns 3 houses. He's everything you're not." Adaeze stood too, her face twisted in disgust. "Come, Nnenna, let's leave this failure behind. You deserve better. You always have." As they walked toward the door, Obinna paused, turning back with a sneer. "Hey, Chukwuebuka, when you're mopping floors tonight, think about the fact that a real man is going to be taking care of your wife. Well, ex-wife." He laughed again, and the 3 of them left, the door slamming behind them. The lawyer, Marcus, gathered his papers, barely glancing at Chukwuebuka. "Tough break, man. But hey, at least you don't have to pay alimony. She made more than you anyway." He chuckled as he left, leaving Chukwuebuka alone in the silent room. For a long moment, Chukwuebuka sat perfectly still. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen for a moment before dialing a number. "Yes, sir?" A professional voice answered immediately. "Timothy, it's me," Chukwuebuka said quietly. "It's done. The divorce is final." "Understood, sir. Shall I proceed with the arrangements?" Chukwuebuka closed his eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. "Not yet. I need some time." "Of course, Mr. Okafor. Take all the time you need." He hung up and sat in the silence, the weight of 8 years pressing down on him like a physical force. But to understand how it came to this, we need to go back. Back to when everything was different. Back to when Nnenna looked at him with love instead of contempt. 8 years earlier, Chukwuebuka had made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He had walked away from everything, his name, his identity, his billions, to find something real. Growing up as the only son of Emeka Okafor, the founder of Titan Core Industries, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the world, Chukwuebuka had been surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Every friendship, every relationship, every conversation came with an agenda. By the time he was 34, he was exhausted. He was the heir to a fortune worth over $15 billion, but he had never known genuine love. Every woman who entered his life saw dollar signs. Every friend wanted a favor. Every conversation was a transaction. So he did something radical. He disappeared. He told only 3 people: his father, who was dying of cancer and understood his son's need for peace, his lawyer, Timothy, and his financial advisor, Ngozi. Together, they created an airtight plan. Chukwuebuka would step away from the company, living under a different identity, working an ordinary job. His father would run Titan Core until his death, at which point a board of trustees would manage it. Chukwuebuka's inheritance would be held in trusts, untouchable, invisible. He moved to Philadelphia, rented a small apartment, and took a job as a night janitor at a corporate office building. It was humbling, exhausting work, but it was honest. And for the first time in his life, when people looked at him, they didn't see money. They saw a man. That's when he met Nnenna. She worked as a marketing executive in one of the offices he cleaned. She was beautiful, ambitious, and sharp-witted. They started talking during his late-night shifts, small conversations at first, then longer ones. She never looked down on him. She treated him like a person, not a paycheck. When he asked her out, she said yes. When he told her he didn't have much money, she said it didn't matter. When he proposed with a simple silver band he'd saved for months to buy, she cried and said yes. For the first 3 years, they were happy. Nnenna worked hard, climbing the corporate ladder. Chukwuebuka continued his janitorial job, coming home exhausted but content. They lived simply: a modest apartment, home-cooked meals, quiet weekends. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. But then things began to change. Nnenna got promoted. She started earning more money, moving in circles with people who had more. She began attending corporate events, meeting executives and entrepreneurs. And slowly, subtly, she started to see Chukwuebuka differently. It started with small comments. "Why don't you look for a better job? Do you really want to do this forever? My colleagues ask what my husband does, and I don't know what to say." Then came her family. Adaeze had never approved of the marriage. She made it clear from the beginning that she thought Nnenna was settling. "A janitor?" she'd said when they first met. "You have a degree, you have a career, and you're marrying a man who cleans toilets?" Obinna was worse. He openly mocked Chukwuebuka at family gatherings, making jokes about Nnenna's charity case and asking when he'd get a real job. Chukwuebuka endured it all in silence. He told himself it didn't matter. He'd found what he was looking for: a woman who loved him for who he was, not what he had. But he was wrong. By year 5, Nnenna stopped defending him. By year 6, she stopped looking at him with warmth. By year 7, she started talking about Chinedu, a successful doctor who'd been pursuing her. By year 8, she'd made up her mind. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Nnenna's family treated him like garbage, hurling insults and accusations. They blamed him for holding her back, for wasting her time, for being a failure. And through it all, Chukwuebuka said nothing. He signed the papers. He let her go. He endured the humiliation because he'd promised himself he would see this through. He would know, once and for all, if real love existed. Now, sitting alone in that conference room, he had his answer. His phone buzzed. A text from Timothy. "Sir, your father's will is being read tomorrow. The board needs you. It's time." Chukwuebuka stared at the message, his finger hovering over the screen. Tomorrow the world would know that Emeka Okafor's only son, the heir to Titan Core Industries, was alive. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight he was still just a janitor, a man who'd been divorced by a woman who never knew who he really was. He stood slowly, pocketing his phone, and walked out of the conference room into the fading Philadelphia sunlight. Behind him, the door clicked shut. Ahead of him, a storm was brewing, and Nnenna had no idea what was coming. The morning of the will reading, Chukwuebuka stood in front of his bathroom mirror, staring at a reflection he barely recognized. For 8 years, he'd worn the same 3 pairs of worn jeans, the same faded shirts, the same tired expression of a man who worked nights mopping floors. But today was different. He pulled out the garment bag from the back of his closet, the one item he'd kept from his old life. Inside was a tailored charcoal suit, Italian silk, worth more than 6 months of his janitor salary. His fingers trembled slightly as he put it on. The fabric felt foreign against his skin, like wearing someone else's identity. At 9 o'clock, a black Mercedes pulled up outside his apartment building. Timothy stepped out, his expression grave but respectful. "Mr. Okafor, it's good to see you again, sir." Chukwuebuka nodded, unable to speak. The weight of what was about to happen pressed against his chest like a stone. The law offices of Henderson and Drake occupied the top 3 floors of Philadelphia's tallest building. As Chukwuebuka stepped into the marble lobby, heads turned. People stared. He'd forgotten what it felt like to command a room simply by walking into it. The conference room was filled with board members, lawyers, and journalists. News cameras lined the back wall. His father's death 3 weeks ago had been international news. Emeka Okafor, tech visionary, billionaire philanthropist, gone at 68. The question on everyone's mind was simple. Who would inherit Titan Core Industries? The answer was sitting in that room, and nobody recognized him. "Ladies and gentlemen," the head lawyer, Gerald Henderson, began, "thank you for attending the reading of Emeka Okafor's last will and testament. Before we begin, I must inform you that Mr. Okafor's sole heir has been living privately for the past 8 years. At his father's request, his identity and whereabouts were kept strictly confidential." Murmurs rippled through the room, cameras flashed. The heir to Titan Core Industries, valued at approximately $15.3 billion, is Chukwuebuka Okafor. Henderson gestured toward him. "Please stand, Mr. Okafor." Chukwuebuka rose slowly. The room erupted. Cameras swarmed. Questions flew like bullets. "Mr. Okafor, where have you been? Why did you disappear? What are your plans for Titan Core?" He held up a hand, and the room fell silent. When he spoke, his voice was steady, controlled. "I stepped away to find something my money couldn't buy. I found it. I lost it. Now I'm back." He sat down, ignoring the frenzy of follow-up questions. The news spread like wildfire. Within an hour, every major outlet was running the story. Missing billionaire heir found was living as Philadelphia janitor. By noon, his face was on every screen in America. And in a bridal boutique across town, Nnenna was trying on wedding dresses when her phone exploded with notifications. "Girl, are you seeing this?" her friend Amara gasped, thrusting her phone in Nnenna's face. "That janitor you divorced? He's a billionaire!" Nnenna's blood turned to ice. She grabbed the phone, her hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped it. There on the screen was Chukwuebuka, her Chukwuebuka, but he looked different. Powerful. Commanding. The headline screamed, "Secret billionaire heir reveals he spent 8 years working as janitor, recently divorced." The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. "Nnenna?" Amara touched her shoulder. "Are you okay?" But Nnenna couldn't breathe. The room spun. 8 years. 8 years she'd been married to one of the richest men in America, and she'd never known. She'd mocked him, belittled him, divorced him, orchestrated emotional narrative arc with confrontation and consequences. I need to continue showing the emotional fallout. Nnenna's realization, her family's reaction, and then the confrontation. I should make this very emotional and show the consequences of their actions. Her mother called 30 seconds later, screaming so loudly Nnenna had to hold the phone away from her ear. "What have you done? Do you know what you've done?" Obinna called next, his voice panicked. "Nnenna, we need to fix this. We need to talk to him. Do you understand what $15 billion means? Do you understand?" But Nnenna wasn't listening. She was remembering. Every cruel word she'd said. Every time she'd made him feel small. Every family dinner where she'd sat silently while her mother and brother tore him apart. The look in his eyes when he'd signed the divorce papers. Not anger, but resignation. Sadness. She'd destroyed the one man who'd actually loved her. The media found her by evening. Reporters camped outside her apartment, shouting questions. "Ms. Nnenna, did you know about your ex-husband's wealth? Do you regret the divorce? Will you try to reconcile?" Inside, Nnenna sat in the dark, still wearing her wedding dress, mascara streaking down her face. Chinedu had called to break off their engagement. "I can't compete with $15 billion, he'd said simply. "Every man in America is going to wonder if you're settling for me." Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Ms. Nnenna, Mr. Okafor has requested a meeting. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., his residence. Come alone." Her hands trembled as she typed back, "I'll be there." The address led her to a gated estate in the suburbs. 10 acres of manicured gardens, a mansion that looked like something from a magazine. The gate opened automatically as her car approached, as if it had been expecting her. A butler answered the door and led her through halls filled with art worth millions. She felt small, insignificant, drowning in the opulence that could have been hers. Chukwuebuka was standing by the window in his study, his back to her. He wore casual clothes now, jeans and a simple shirt, but even from behind he looked different. Confident. Complete. "Hello, Nnenna." Her voice cracked. "Chukwuebuka, Why did you come?" He turned, and his eyes were the same ones she'd fallen in love with years ago, but they were harder now. Colder. "I needed to see you. I needed to explain—" "Explain what?" His voice was quiet, but it cut like glass. "That you loved me when you thought I was nobody, but you're here now because you know I'm somebody? That's not an explanation, Nnenna. That's proof." Tears streamed down her face. "I made a mistake. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, Chukwuebuka, we can start over. I'll do anything." "Do you know what the saddest part is?" He stepped closer, and she could see the pain in his eyes. "I would have given you everything. Not the money. I would have given you me, the real me. But you didn't want that. You wanted a successful husband, a man you could show off, a man who made you look good." "That's not true. Your mother called me pathetic. Your brother said I was a failure, and you sat there and let them. You agreed with them." His voice broke slightly. "I loved you, Nnenna. I loved you more than I've ever loved anyone, and it wasn't enough." She reached for him, but he stepped back. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "No." The word was final. Absolute. "You made your choice. You chose your pride over our marriage. You chose humiliation over loyalty. You chose to leave." He walked to his desk and picked up a folder. "Inside this folder is a check for $5 million. It's yours. Consider it compensation for the years you supported us financially." Nnenna shook her head violently. "I don't want your money. I want you." "You never wanted me," he said softly. "You wanted the idea of me. the potential of me. But the real me, the man who mopped floors and came home tired, the man who was happy with a simple life, you were ashamed of him. He held out the folder. Take it. Move on. Find someone who fits the life you want. I don't want that life anymore, she whispered. I want the life we had. Chukwuebuka smiled, but it was the saddest smile she'd ever seen. No, you don't. You hated that life. You hated every second of it, and I can't spend my life with someone who's ashamed of me. He pressed the folder into her hands. Goodbye, Nnenna. I hope you find what you're looking for. The butler appeared at the door, a silent dismissal. Nnenna stood frozen, the folder heavy in her hands, heavier than any weight she'd ever carried. I love you, she said one last time. Chukwuebuka turned back to the window. You loved the janitor enough to marry him, but you didn't love him enough to stay. That tells me everything I need to know. She left with tears blinding her vision, past the gardens, past the gates, past the life that could have been hers. 6 months later, Chukwuebuka stood at the groundbreaking ceremony for the Emeka Okafor Foundation, a $1 billion initiative to provide education and opportunities for underprivileged communities. The crowd was massive: politicians, celebrities, philanthropists. But he barely noticed them. In his pocket was a letter from Nnenna. He hadn't opened it. He didn't need to. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. As he drove the golden shovel into the earth, cameras flashing around him, he thought about the man he'd been, the janitor who'd believed in love. That man was gone. But he'd served his purpose. He'd taught Chukwuebuka the most valuable lesson money couldn't buy. That real love sees you at your lowest and chooses to stay. Nnenna hadn't stayed. Her family had humiliated him, and she'd let them. And now she would spend the rest of her life knowing she'd walked away from a fortune because she couldn't see past a mop and bucket. The irony wasn't lost on him. She'd divorced him without knowing he owned a multi-billion-dollar company. She'd humiliated him without knowing who he really was. And now she knew. Now everyone knew. But knowledge, Chukwuebuka had learned, always comes too late.